Can you please wait for that?
Yes.
Hello to all. Thank you for being here. I see Michael at the D's. Michael, hello. Carmel, hello.
Lefteris,
Hello.
Lefteris
Hello.
Yes.
Hello to all.
Yeah, I think, Olga, the attendees are not allowed to speak, so they are muted at
Yes.
the moment.
Yes.
No, they won't reply unless I give them the authority to speak on this webinar.
Okay.
But I see that we have some comments in the chat already.
Okay. So I think that we can start right now. I don't see Dimos. Hello, Antonis. Hi. Thank you all for being here. So I wait a minute for Dimos to connect. I don't know if he's able to do that. We can start in a minute. Hello, Carmel. Okay, let's start. And I think that Dimos is going to be here. Okay, well, welcome to another EADPP Greek branches event. As we used to say in this digital and global environment, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I thank you all for the honor that you make us to be here with us. I am Olga Tsiptse. I am a lawyer and privacy professional, and I am also a chair of a Greek branch and elected secretary of certification committee. And before giving the floor to our Greece's General Secretary and the Chair of Communication and Events Committee, Mr. Dimos Kostoulas, I want to share some information with you about EADPP. EADPP is the European Association of Data Protection Professionals and was established in the 28th of November of 2018 in Maastricht, the Netherlands. The primary aim of this association is to facilitate, organize, structure, and represent European data protection professionals based on Europe. Of course, in this light, our two first initiatives are to create an EADPP certificate scheme for data protection professionals and to secure proper representation of all relevant levels of European Union. Up to now, we count 1,118 members, and we are very active in Europe. As you can see, some of our achievements, apart from the creation of the unique certification scheme, are the creation of task groups for monitoring European Data Protection Board's guidelines that are set in public consultation. We have already commented on 4 guidelines of European Data Protection Board. EADPP has been approved by the member states following a voting procedure to participate with a liaison status at the Technical Committee of Experts, CENSELEC, for developing the European standards for cybersecurity and data protection. You can find more information in this link that I write in the slides. Of course, EADPP has recently, the late of April 2021, participated at the European Data Protection Board stakeholder event on processing of personal data for scientific research purposes. That was a unique moment for EADPP. And last but not least, EADPP is an observer at the Council of Europe's Ad Hoc Committee for Artificial Intelligence, what is called CAHI. And these are only the beginning, and we are promising that. So if you want to become a member of our association, if you're not already one, you can join. You can visit our site. This is www.eadpp.eu, and you can sign up. And of course, there are some links here provided for further information. So these are, for me, I don't want to waste this precious time of Andrea, who is an excellent professional from Brazil and is going to share her views. Before giving her the floor, I would like to thank all my team, Greek board. I would like to thank for this work that they are doing, hard work, though they are all very busy professionals. And this is General Secretary Dimos Kostoulas, and our members Tassos Malisagos, Lefteris Hioudakis, and Sofia Tsiptse. If Dimos is here, I would like to give him the floor to say some hellos, and I am stop sharing my screen. I think that Dimos is not here. So Tassos, if you want to take his moment. Tassos, you are muted. Please unmute your.
Okay. Yes, Olga. As a moderator of this webinar, at this point, I would like to present the speaker of today's event. Based in Brazil, Ms. Andrea Willemin is a Chief Data Protection Officer at Softplan and Privacy by Design expert. She is a guest lecturer and professor of data protection and Ministerio Protection at Ministerio Público de Santa Catarina and Advocacia Geral da Unicao. Moreover, she is a data protection officer certificate by the European Union, a privacy by design and IT expert. Since 2000, working with data protection, a privacy data protection attorney at law, a PhD candidate in technology and science information, a member of the Commission of Law and International Relations of OAB, a GDPR LGPD, framework and conceptor, and an associate international expert advisor at Wikigonia. Moreover, Ms. Willemin is a coordinator and speaker at international events, courses, and conferences concerning data protection issues. Ms. Willemin will bring to discussion issues concerning the difference between data protection in Brazil and in EU. And Ms. Willemin, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm not seeing me. I hope you are seeing me.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you. It's nice. Oh, it's a big pleasure to be here with EADPP today to talk about data protection in South America, in Latin America, and especially in Brazil. And for me, it's a big opportunity to learn with you guys each more, and also to share important informations and how to deal with all these different laws that you have now. So thank you again for this opportunity. For me here in Brazil, we are dealing with a new fundamental rights. No, the data protection now for Brazilian is a new fundamental rights, and in the same time we have a new law, the LGPD, and it's kind of different and very challenging for all the country, because we starting in South America, we have more a culture of not a culture for the data protection, but more for freedom of expression. So it's not easy to change things one day to another, you know. We are very far from Europe for the moment, but the first steps are be done. So I'm more confident about what are coming in the next years here. I will try to start this presentation with, I will share my screen with you. It'll be easy. And I bring for us some special topics. Then we could have more subjects to discuss if you like that. I will put here. Now I'm seeing me, and also I can see my screen. It's perfect. Very easy. 1 minute, then I can put it in a big way. Oh, it's nice now. So if you have doubts about my presentation, let me know, and you can send some questions. And also, I think in the end, you could participate directly and you can share some information, okay? For today, what's we are talking about, it's the issues from a global perspective of data protection. It's very nice to talk about that. And I bring here some topics that I think they are very important to well understand. I know lots of you know better than me about data protections in some while, but data protection legislation in Latin America is kind of new, not for all countries of Latin America, but for some of them, as Brazil. Brazil is kind of new. And the adequacy on data protection in this continent, how it's working now, what is effective or not, or we are doing here, it's very interesting to understand. Also to know better the difference and the similarities between GDPR and LGPD. LGPD now, it's a big law for Brazilian and for all the world, and as Brazil as big as Europe, so it take a very good importance to deal with it. The status of LGPD implementation in Brazil, how it's occurring now, what we are doing, and I bring also some topics that we can improve better, is the implementation of the LGPD in data protection, and also the problems with COVID. I think all the world is passing for this now. Here in Brazil is very complicated because we have a COVID situation and new variants of COVID, and the country is so big and it's difficult some way to know and to deal with all these problems at the same time. And it's not it's also the economic problems that are bring for us to implement in something in companies, and at the same time have to implement all a structure for COVID. So it could be nice to talk about that. And measures and policies and the security for cloud computing, it's also something important when we are talking about transfers and the cross-border information. And GDPR and its influence in the world, and the influence of it here in South America and particularly in Brazil. So data protection in Latin America, for both of you, you could know, Latin America is very big, you know, and very different, the culture from Europe. Even we have these similarities of legislation because we are colonized by Europeans. So what's important to understand, you know, since the beginning of this century, Latin America have been, you know, his effective regulations in data processing. He's responded to a global necessity introduction of this kind of law to be easier, you know, and we have this pressure for the Europe to be in compliance with data protection law, in particularity with data protection European law. So since Directive 95/46, we have this starting here in Brazil, and also for other measures with the Canadian legislation, we need to do it too. Countries as Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, and now Brazil now have been establishing laws about data protection, but it was not yet as so big as GDPR are for the European. It was like a starter, you know, but some of them, as for example, Mexico, Uruguay, and Argentina, were more advanced on this kind of regulation for his countries now. And with the GDPR, the Latin America countries now have to review and readapt its laws now to be more in compliance with the GDPR, and establishing also new levels of the protection for that. Just here. Some examples of data protection legislation in Latin America after the GDPR. We can see that lots of countries are changed. For example, here in Brazil, now we have the LGPD law. It starts in 2018, and the same in Chile. They are establishing new rights about data protection. And in Argentina, they established data protection authority. They had the law, but the authority is kind of new. So we are trying to be more GDPR compliance, here in South America too. And for example, in Brazil now, finally, after a big novel, we have our data protection authority too. It's not as so independent or as we like it to be, and like authorities in Europe, but it's kind of good for the beginning here. And what is the current situation about data protection? In general, data protection are being implemented. So it's not red, it's nice. This we can see here in the picture that we have different levels. It's a picture from 2020. It's not from this year, but it's the same, not change every lots. And with COVID situation, it's very the same, the situation with the implementation here in South America. So you can see that now Brazil is in a moderated adequacy with data protection. We have then Argentina that is more strong, and the countries like others countries like Paraguay or Chile, or Chile is okay. Paraguay is more or Bolivia, for example, it's limited. They are starting now. For example, Ecuador are starting the pourparlers. They will be voting a new law for Ecuador. So it's something in course of be implementing. For that, some countries already have a good level of legislation, like Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina. Others countries possibility will need more time in the future to do this. But you can take a look in this map after, and then we can discuss if you want more about a specific place in the world. For example, Mexico now, it's a very nice improvement. They had the Convention 108, so it's very good to see how they are dealing with that. Other point that is very important for Latin America is understand the influence about the GDPR. So all these changes that we are now living here with data protections come from the influence about GDPR in Europe. We need to understand about OCDE, and also about the necessity for e-commerce and to treat data and to process data all around the world for this new economy that we are living. And South America needs to be in the good way and have this opportunity to sell, to work, and to be as in measures to understand and treat the same information. So it's very important for us here to be in compliance with GDPR. Other point, it's that is very important for South America and Latin America is data transfer cross-border. And for me, it's one of the most difficult points because here in Brazil, it's we need to understand that we are in the beginning of the implementation of LGPD, but we don't have a complete framework, for example, including data transfers. So it's just in the beginning. So for some situations, now we have the law, but for other situations, as data transfers is more complicated. No, it's still to the beginning. And for other countries, as Argentina, for example, they have the complete framework, and the personal data could be transmitted only in determined situations, now for legitimate purpose of the transfer or with the prior consent. And it's something very important. I let for you also more details in the slides. You can see it later. I'm not passing all the points because it's a lot of them, but we can see that Argentina is in a good way with data transfer, and they have this framework implemented differently from Brazil now. No, Chile also they don't contain a specific provision in respect of international data transfers. However, the transfer of personal data now of these jurisdictions may be deemed as use of data and would therefore require authorization and other requirements established by the law. So we can see also for Chile, it's not really a framework as we have in Europe for GDPR, but they have certain rules that you can use it when we need to do transfers. Other point that is very important, and it's the Colombia. Colombia now has his authority, and Colombia also has a better framework than, for example, now here we have in Brazil. And in this case, now that the controller for when they need to do the transfer of personal data, now the controller, the data controller or the data processor now located in Colombia is responsible for the personal data. So they have lots of different specific regulation for how it could works or not, and in what situation it's forbidden or not to do the data transfers. So it's very important to take a look. If you are working with Colombia, they are very strict for the use of personal data nowadays, and also for the data transfers. And in Mexico, we have that domestic or international transfers of personal data may be carried out without the consent of data subject, where the transfer is forced to a law or treated to Mexico. So what for me is very important to let you know that differently to work with GDPR, that now we can deal with the same rules all about the European continent. Here in South America, we need to be able to deal with different situations for each country. We don't have only one law for every countries, or to implement the same situations for each countries we are dealing with. And the problem is in Latin America, we don't have the structure that we have now in the European community. So here it is more difficult when we are trying to do business, or even to bring some solutions, because each country has different laws and also different situations now for put it in place. So we need to be very careful about what we are doing. It's the same for data transfers in Uruguay. Uruguay is also our neighbor here in Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, and it's so close, but it's so far at the same time, And Uruguay is also a country that they have data protection law. It's a very nice one, and the personal data, no, they can only be transferred for a third party for purposes directly related to a legitimate interest or art, and the transfers and the prior consent of data subject. So that's, as you can see, it depends of the country, it depends of the situation. We need to be able to analyze each country individuality with their individuality, and pay attention of the specificity. It's very important when we are doing data transfers, because they have lots of difference. And how about the implementation of the LGPD here in Brazil? No, it's for me, it's a challenge, a very big one. I'm working with different authorities here in Brazil, and try to create a big and really framework for lots of institutions. Now, in particularity, I'm working with the Public Ministry, the National Council of Public Ministry, and for them, it's a big challenge, because could you imagine it to change all the structure of one of the most big and influential authorities in Brazil and powers in Brazil, with 27 states, and created a new regulation about data privacy and how to treat all of that. So for Brazil and Brazilians, LGPD is a revolution, and our framework is not a red. No, why not? Because we have the LGPD, but we need to find other solutions. No? For example, data transfers, models, and things like that. That it's running, but not ready yet. Why? Because our authority, it's not red, and it comes after the LGBT law. It takes a while, then they could decide how it will be work with this authority. And it's not an independent authority for the moment, and it's a very small structure, and it's just beginning. So it takes longer for them to Brazil have a definitively framework about data protection. But LGPD helps a lot now, and we have this opportunity now to be and to do a little comparison and what is the similarities and difference about LGPD and GDPR. It could be nice, then we can deal with it and understand also that the administrative structure of LGPD and in Brazil are very different. So what we need to understand that in Europe, you need to go for the administrative way, then after that you can go to the court. Here in Brazil, if you have a problem with your data or your data, you could go for the administrative way, but you could also at the same time go to the court. It helps people in but it's kind of different of Europe, okay? But it's important to know. Now I bring here some points that I think it's important to understand, and you can see some difference. I will just talk generally about that, but if you have some questions in a specific point, let me know, and then you can discuss it better in the end of the presentation. But what is the definition? What's considered personal data and sensitive data? And are they similar? They are a similarity or difference? No, the personal data processing, it's another point, and special and sensitive data processing, it's another point. Children's and teenagers data access rights and the data protection. Who's the actor are, it's very important to understand, but here I can say you now, it's like similarity to the GDPR, DPOs. For the Brazilian, the name of the DPO is Encarregado de Dados. Now, it's a very strange name for us, but it's what the law changed, and Encarregado de Dados. No, it's, for me, it's strange, but I prefer GPO, but it's okay. It's just another name, and there are some differences. The link between controller and processor, and here in Brazil, we had long discussed because it's something that comes from GDPR, and the interpretation here in Brazil is not so clear sometimes, but I think they are going to the good way now. Territorial scope, fines and non-compliance with the law, the control and process accountability, security and data breach. It's very important for us also. Data protection report and the law enforcement. So all these points we can see together, or I just take now some of them that I think it's more important, and the others we can see if you have some questions about that. But GDPR and LGPD have the similar territorial scopes. It's important. We can use the same definitions from the GDPR. Both the GDPR and the LGPD qualify consent as the key element for companies to process personal data. And it's another point. But here, what I want to let you know is that consent, what it means in the practice, is very different as a judicial instrument in Europe than it is here in Brazil. So you need to pay attention for that, okay? It's not the equal, it's not the equal. When I say consent in Europe, it means something different that it means here in Brazil. So for judicial aspects, you need to pay attention of this point, okay? LGPD and GDPR both guarantee the individual the right of access to their personal data. Likewise, holders can at any time request that companies that are collecting their data carry out the portability correction or definitive deletion of the information. It's okay, no problems about that. It's a little the same. The difference is the regard is in the period set for companies to offer access. Now in GDPR determines that companies have 30 days to respond to requests. LGPD offers only 15 days. I don't know why they do that, because here is very complex to deal with 15 days for this kind of request, but it's the choice of the legislator, and it's what we have now. The LGPD and the GDPR again have another big difference. Now they concerns the processing of personal data for direct marketing purpose. GDPR guarantees that data subjects the right to object to any time to the processing of their personal data for the purpose of profiling in market. The LGPD does not deal specifically with direct marketing, and this may suggest an authorization. No, it's a big point to discuss. We don't have any decisions, no judicial decisions, so it's difficult for me to say you if it will how it will be. But for the moment, you know that it's not so clear in our law than it is in GDPR, okay? And the other point is the sanctions, no? And the GDPR that has, for example, other values than LGPD, no? And even for us, 50 million reais, it's our money here in Brazil, are a lot of money. It's not nothing compares to the value of 10 or 20 million in euros. So it's big, but not so big. But about 2%, it depends of the companies. It could be very important find here also. And then I bring another point that for me is very, very important. It's a cloud application and security policy among states. And why? Because as I said, we don't have this framework ready for Brazil yet. So even clouds, we don't know exactly what you need to deal with. So the problem is, for the moment, for example, lots of Brazilian clouds are outside Brazil. And even for public sector, what could be a problem if when the national authority decide for the framework and change some instructions. And we know how difficult it is to deal with clouds applications and how to define their role inside a contract and as a processor of data. And it's the same problem here in Brazil, but we thought our framework is more complex. So it could be nice if you have some questions about that, more specifically, how we're dealing with this here in Brazil, or how, for example, public sector with clouds, or even the private sector, how they are dealing with clouds structures, and what are changing our clouds here in Brazil also to be able to deal with GDPR and to be able also with LGPD. And it could be nice to discuss after together. The implementation and the pandemic, it's another point that I bring to talk with you today. It's complicated at some, because Brazil is not so rich as Europe, no? And for it's, of course, for implementing that protection, it takes lots of money. It depends what we need to do. And for Brazilian and the informal economy, and also for medium companies and small companies, is very difficult to deal with the pandemic of COVID, and at the same time of implement the data protection measures. Now, it's crazy because with the pandemic, we have this big increasement of the use of devices and the use of internet and the data, and in the otherwise we are not prepared for that, no? And we need to start to deal with, for example, working for home and using personal devices, and for companies they need to do a very big adaptation, as we did also in Europe. But here in Brazil, the situation is that it's data protection is not a culture. So it was more difficult to let people know about what are happening and the big problems that we have with this side of the and what are the kind of dangers we are dealing when we are using now the new ways of connecting. And this point for me is very important to say something that recently we had a very big data breach here in Brazil. It was like all citizens had their data and breached, and it was like 230 millions of data of Brazilian was leaked. So you could imagine this problem for Brazilian, because it's so big that for a country that don't have the culture of data protection, they don't understand what are happening. And so few people are going to see what it means for them to have their data leaked. So you can see that it's not easy when are establishing that protection, because you need to deal with culture and also with economics, and also with to the new vision of the all population. And it's so big for us sometimes, no? But we are in a good way, I hope. And as I said, we had the National Authority on Data Protection, EADPP. It's quite new, and it's not independent. And it's a problem for us because it's directly linked by the executive power for the presidents here in Brazil. And it's complicated to say that they are doing the fiscality of data protection also for the government. So I'm not sure about this point of this agenda. But what is very good for Brazil, what we need to understand, that it's also something very different from Europe. The national authority now is not independent, but we have another power in Brazil that has the public ministry, that is a constitutional power, independent. And he is the big one that are improve data protection more than national authority on data protection. So for us, the national authority on data protection is just one more it's one more agency working here in Brazil, and they are helping a lot. They are dealing with legislations and regulamentations, and also with fines. But the big structure that we already have is public ministry, because public ministry here in Brazil is not inside the judicial court. He is another power, and he does now all the fiscalization about the law, and especially about data protection and the real fundamental rights. So I'm quite sure that working with public ministry here, we have all we need about an agency in Europe. So for us, even the INPD is not red or is too small or are linked to the presidents of Brazil with the executive power, for us is not a problem, because we have another different structure that is the public ministry, and it's very important for us as society and as population. And I'm sure that with public ministry working with, and our rights will be very, very secure now and good in the future. I hope not too far. And the INPD, I let here some data for you. It's a federal organism that will inspect the regulation to impose penalties and processing agencies. But as I said, it's a government body, and it's not independent. So we need to understand that you will not be the same as EADPP or than you have in GDPR. Okay, it's very, very different for us. And it's a little resume and for our talk now. I hope I could help you to be more in compliance with LGPD or other Latin America's law of data protection. And if you have some questions, or now you can pass for the debate. I let here my LinkedIn for them that want to talk with me after the conference also. So I think it's it. I bring it back for you.
Mrs. Andrea Willemin, thank you very, very much for this very fruitful and very informative session that you provided us. Before having these questions that are certainly here, I enabled Mr. Michael Spratt, Mrs. Carmel Mulligan, Mr. Eleftheris Cheliudakis, in order to say something about or ask whatever they want to ask. Thank you very much. Dimos, can you hear us?
Yes.
We have some questions.
Hi,
yes.
Dimos.
Hello. Congratulations for your thorough presentation. Ms. Willemin, a recent research conducted by the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, that's SEV, has resulted in some crucial points concerning the level of compliance of the Greek enterprises 3 years after the implementation of GDPR. Some key points of the local research are that 7 in 10 companies say they are more confident about the protection of the data they process, while 4 in 10 of their customers rated it positively. 4 in 10 companies states that they do not process any personal data or very little. 8 out of 10 companies assigned the role of data protection officer, but to people who hold other positions in the company with a possibility of conflict of interest. Regarding the staff, and here I want to set a question, it is considered difficult to change the culture in the company together with the response of employees to the new requirements, and also the implementation of some technical measures, data mapping and impact assessment studies are characterized difficult. Taking in mind the results of this Greek research, what is the general compliance status for enterprises operating in Brazil and in Latin America on general? And do you also see a substantial resistance in change on behalf of personnel and management teams when it comes to enforce data protection measures and to promote a culture towards data protection? As the local research showed regarding the staff, it's considered very difficult to change the culture. Thank you.
Yes, for us, the culture and to change the culture of companies are something very difficult now, no? And I think it's the when you put data protection in the side of another points of the company that they have to decide. For the CEO or for the board, normally it's just one more point. They don't take it as, oh my God, now I need to deal with data protection. Oh, okay, you need one more law here in Brazil, and now you need to deal with that. And with the approximation of the sanctions that will be starting now in August of this year, we can see some difference. And also for the public sector, they start to move themselves and find a solution, a better solution for data protection, because finally they are understanding that it's not just something that you can do in 1 month, 2 months, that you need to adapt all the company structure, all the institutional organization need to be put in a new way, and it takes time. So they are a kind of change their mind. It's not completely ready yet, and the culture is very resistant. But for this approximation of the penalties and the movement is started. So I think in 1-2 years, Brazil will be more data protection than they are nowadays. No, but I saw here in the chat also something asked me about the GPIA, and if you have the same here in Brazil. Yes, we have the same, but the problem is that we need a regulation, specifically regulation, to know how you need to do a GPIA here in Brazil, and it's not clear yet. We need to be more in details with the new agency, and it will be in the future. But what we are using is the same recommendations that you use for GDPR. So we are doing GPIAs in the same cases, that we are using it for the GDPR, for example.
Okay, Andrea, that was my question about DPAs. And I was wondering, because I'm just interested in it.
I'm sorry, this is Michael Spratt talking.
Yeah, sorry.
Hello, Michael.
Sorry. Hello, Andrea. It's very, very interesting talk, and thank you very, very much. It's very comprehensive. You say that they're going to produce some new guidance for Brazil on how a DPIA should be produced. Have you any idea when that will be done? Is there a timeline?
Sorry, I couldn't understand you very well because it cuts for me here.
I'm sorry, it's probably my funny accent.
Oh, sorry.
The guidance as to when a DPIA is required or how it's going to be produced, when will that be ready?
We don't know yet.
Ah.
Because the agency is now take place, it's something quite new. So
Mhm.
what we are doing, we are using the same models and the same requests about the GDPR for the DPIA. But the specifically one about Brazilian, we have the provisioning law. But to do exactly when, how, and what we need to be, it will be in, I think, in few months with the new agency, but it's not ready for that yet.
Okay, so if you reckon a few months, that kind of
A
idea.
few months, yeah, I think few months now, because the agency now she has a body, and finally she has some uh, measures in place, but it's not read, and we don't have any regulation from them just
Mhm.
until this moment. No, so we need to wait a little. I think few months yet, perhaps until August. Then there will be more clear for results.
Okay, it's just if I could just make a comment there. I've noticed with other countries that are building on the GDPR, they're all making little changes.
Yes.
Kenya in Kenya, you have to submit the data protection impact assessment to their regulator 2 weeks in advance of starting processing, for example. And I wonder what changes they're going to do in Brazil before releasing their guidance.
Yes, exactly. For me, it's, for example, in Mexico, I think they are more clear. Colombia also too, no, and Argentina and Uruguay, and for Argentina has a recent also authority for, so the DPIA is in some conditions too. But for example, here in Brazil, we don't know how it will pass now with the presentation of the DPIA and how what we need to declare or not, when and what situations. Is the same for the data breach. So for the moment, the DPIA and the data breach are waiting for implementation, and but companies are using the same directions about the GDPR. Then they can say that they trying to be in compliance with that, no. But it's not. As I said, it's not so clear yet. It's a process. It takes longer here in Brazil, and the agency is not a big structure. It's a small structure, even for Brazil. It's very small, no. So could you imagine with a little agency here for 27 states? It's very complicated. We don't know yet how it will be working and how they are dealing with it. But for the moment, it's not so clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael is the chair of Iris branch of EADPP. So, and he's very active organizing all these EADPP branches thing. And
very good.
Thank him very much for his
Thank
question.
You.
So
I hope I could help you, Michael. It's not clear for me too. It's the problem, you know. I want to know this answer sometimes too, you know. I want to cry sometimes, and we are trying to do it. And as I said too in my presentation, we are working with the public ministry now and try to find solutions, because all the society needs to know better about these points. And it's take totally too long for us to all companies and even the public sector, no, and it's not clear. It's very complicated. Yeah.
Thank you
very much. I think Arthur Aruda, if I pronounce that correct, has an answer question also.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So, Mrs. Willemin, I follow your incredible work here with the Brazilian authorities. So I think it's so important to remind the cultural factor applying the LGPD here. So I bring you important question here. What are the main challenges implementing this regulation here in Brazil?
Oh, you brought the answer for me. The first one is the culture, no, and the second one for me, it's in the same side as the culture, is to convince people that they need to do that, because now you have a fundamental right. And when people are just looking for LGPD as a new law, without understand that it's also a fundamental right for the citizen, it's very complicated. They are not doing nothing because it's so many work. It takes so many time, and it's not. It needs so many efforts for all the company to structure process systems and everything. But then when people understand that they are concerned about be part of this process and they have a new right of that protection, it starts to change. So we need to bring it more clear for our population, for Brazilian, no, that this fundamental right is very important, and we don't have other way to take care of personal data. So when they understand that they are the owners of their data, and it's complicated to say here in Brazil, because until now, personal data are not ours. No, it was about people that have the database. It's not my data before the LGPD. Now, with the fundamental rights, the first step is to let people know that personal data are their data, no, and they are the owner of their data, and the others are not the owner, and they can. Doing that, I'm sure that you can start a revolution about personal data in Brazil, because having people in our side for putting this law in place will be a very nice challenge and way to find a solution more fast and more effectively for that protection.
So it seems you have a huge work ahead, right?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur.
Okay, one more question in the chat box. The LGPD transfers are allowed for countries deemed adequate by the Autoridade Nacional de Proteção de Dados or standard contractual clauses adopted by the ANPD. By when you could have this in place? This is a question in the chat box from Ms. Diana.
And Diana, now transfers are allowed for countries deemed adequate by authority or standard contractual clause adopted by the NPD. Oh, it's the same problem. Now, by when we could have this in place? I don't know yet. So sorry for that question, for that answer. You know, I think it will take a little, as I said, perhaps for August or after August, since the authority starts to do the new regulations for us. For the moment, we don't have any kind of regulation about the LGPD yet, so it takes longer. We are using the GDPR framework for companies and the public sector, and to try to find a way, as Brazil as a kind of copy of the GDPR. No? The Brazilian law is a kind of copy of the GDPR, kind of. No, it's very different, but in a way, I cannot affirm that, but I can say that we have a tendency to be in compliance with the GDPR. So I think the regulation will go in the same way, we hope. But when effectively, I couldn't say yet.
Okay, thank you so much for the
Can I ask you something?
Yes, of course.
I would like to have your opinion about the decision Schrems 2 and how much did it influence the policy in cloud applications. Do you think that the necessary measures have been taken for the security of cross-border transports? And which are the security measures?
For these security measures for Brazil?
About the European decision Schrems 2.
Yes, I understood. Yes. So here, I think when we are talking about shrimp, it's about more GDPR than LGPD. So you can ask for the measures that we are implementing and that they are necessary for GDPR. All companies and even the government here know that they need to deal with this GDPR. So they are able to put these measures in place. It's not a problem. It's more when it's the opposite. Okay, when you have data in Europe, you have to bring them to Brazil, and what law you need to use, then it's not clear. But when are the situation of the application of the GDPR, so you can use the same decisions that we need for all European countries, and it will be the same for Brazilians too, as a third country, yeah, of course, not as a second, as a third country. You can you can officialize that they need to be in accordance with the GDPR.
Can I say one more question concerning the
Yes.
adequacy test? I don't know whether this point was covered because I had some unstable internet. What about the adequacy test for countries in the Latin America region? As I understand, countries in the region should make continuous effort to be whitelisted by the European Commission in order for data to be transferred freely from the EU to those countries. Do you agree that from a trade perspective and a commercial perspective, one of the main tests for data transfers for whitelisting from the EU is the adequacy test?
For example, here in here in South America, for example, countries as Argentina and Uruguay, they have a free data transfer with EU. Okay, it's they have our framework. It's the problem, and Mexico too. But the big problem for us is more about the Brazil, because Brazil is kind of new. It starts in 2020 and effectively on 20 and 2020 now the law, and we don't have all the framework. So for data transfers, it's more complicated. We have the law, but not all the data transfers. But other countries in South America, as I said, Argentina, Uruguay, they have their framework and they can do data transfer directly to EU without any problem. No, other countries as Chile, it no, but Colombia, yes. So you need to look for each country, see if they have or no this disposition, but not all of them has a framework. For example, Brazil don't have. We don't have this possibility, unfortunately. So it depends, but we will have, no, it's just take more time, but one day, I hope next year, perhaps, when the agency will be more in place, we could come back here and talk with more details about what are passing with data transfers from Brazil to another country. For this moment, Brazil is a third country, and we don't have the direct transfers for you.
I have a question too. Regarding the harmonizing of data protection compliance across Latin America, is there, let's say, a continental attempt, a Latin American attempt, like the GDPR in Europe? And how can the new Brazilian data protection law influence things in the broader region, and to which extent?
Very nice. So I would be so proud if LGPD could influence our neighborhood countries, because it will be more easy to treat data in South and Latin America. No, so for the moment, it's not started an official debate about that, but I'm sure, because we have lots of consultation about LGPD law and how to improve this law. And for example, Ecuador and other countries, now we have delegations from Brazilian going to another, for our neighbors countries to do that. And for me, what I hope so is that LGPD will be maintained as in compliance with GDPR. So in this way, if LGPD maintains, with all new regulation that they need to do and improvement and all the effectivity that need to take if we maintain our compliance with GDPR. So it will be very important have this construction with our neighbor countries, because Brazil is very influent for South America and Latin America. It's so big and we have so many neighbors. And if we have that, it will be so more easy to deal with data here in South and Latin America. So I hope it's good, it will be a way and it will be an example for all our continent.
Okay, and one more question. Focusing more on the comparison of the new Brazilian data protection law, or LGPD, let's say, versus the GDPR. Can you highlight some significant similarities and some differences? I could expect that the relatively new national law in Brazil should have many similarities with the GDPR, since GDPR was put into effect in May 2019. And Brazil had the time, almost 2 years, to model its law on the GDPR. Is this the case?
I explain. I put lots of points in my
Yes.
presentation that you can talk about more specifically of each points of GDPR and LGPD. But what is for me the big difference is that GDPR came to Europe to unificated all the individual countries' data protection law, internal data protection law of Greece, Italian, Germany, French, and now we have this big framework for each one. In Brazil, LGPD arrived based on GDPR, but internal in Brazil, we don't have any regulation or law about data protection. It's kind of new, and we have only GDPR as a model and LGPD as a law. So it's very difficult to us to put it in place because we don't have this internal legislation about data protection. We need to construct all the data protections law in Brazil, and we have the LGPD that dictated something for all the country, but we don't have this basic structure yet. And the measures, the big difference sometimes not so big because LGPD is really based in GDPR, and they have different. For example, the sanctions are different. The use of it for the public sector, for the private sector, how you use the data, but in the big ways it's the same. But the difference is that until now, we don't have jurisprudence or court decisions about data protection in the LGPD way. So with the new regulamentations that we are waiting for them, it could be more or less approach or not from GDPR. So for the moment, when we are just looking for the law, they are both the same. But when how it will be interpreted here in Brazil, how it will come for our internal laws, we don't know yet. And there is the big deal, because it could take or have a very different interpretation that we have in GDPR. So we need to wait and understand that data protection as a right and also as a new law for Brazil is quite new. Now it's 2 years that we're talking about that here. And before that, the culture was freedom of expression. And it's so different, and it will take a while. Then we could do more and talk more about what's happening here and how it are in Europe. But for the law, if you want to just to compare rights of the law, LGPD law and GDPR, we can say it's both the same. But they have details. For example, as I said, the DPIA, we need to know more about that in a specific regulation, no, but it is in the law. Data breach, the same. But for the rights, what are personal data, or what are sensitive data and personal data, the difference, it's quite the same for both.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. It's very, for me, it's very, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please,
Sorry,
please, Andrea.
no, I will say just for me, it's quite crazy, you know, because I came from Switzerland, and I have this culture of data protection since always in my life. But here in Brazil is so quite new, you know, and when we need to come here and explain people what are personal data of data protection, and it's not easy, you know, when you don't have all your life passed in use data here in Brazil. It's so different of the use of data in Europe. So this is for me the best challenge you have, and to change these points of the culture, and let people understand better what are their rights about their data. And it's so big, you know, because the country is so different, and you have so different regions here, and oh my god, it's a very, very big job for that. Is that
thank you very much. Dimos?
Yes, I think we have no more questions in the chat box. We can say that this webinar, this very interesting webinar, is coming to an end. I would want.
I think Dimos has connection issues.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I have 1 minute?
Thank you. While Dimos is trying
to address some things about the Greek branch, Olga?
Yes, of course, but your connection is a little bit unstable. I don't.
Okay, should I give it a try maybe?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so the local team was formed within 2019 in order to support the mission of EADPP Europe. The team consists of experienced professionals with different backgrounds. For example, lawyers, information security officers, professionals with an administrative background, who they are all dealing with data protection seminars. The webinar Doing Business Online in Social Distancing Era, the webinar Personal Data Issues in Times of Emergencies, and in cooperation with Homo Digitalis, a webinar having to do with certain platforms and campaigns concerning data protection. Apart from the above webinars, the Greek branch of EADPP has a strong presence in EADPP Europe, with some members of the local board participating in European committees and or being involved in task forces and other initiatives on a European level. Through this webinar and through many more actions and events in the future, we, the Greek branch, would like to assist the EADPP Europe in fulfilling its targets. At this point, I personally would like to thank the speaker, the Honorable Ms. Willemin, for her time to share her thoughts about the, let's say, implementation of data protection issues in the Latin America, and to be compared with GDPR. From my side, many thanks, and I hope to see you again.
Me too. I hope too, Dimos. We need to talk more, because it's so important that you have a consensus about GDPR and LGPD and all Latin America data protection law. No, so it'll be a pleasure for me to be here again in other opportunities.
Okay, Tassos, one quick conclusion from you.
I wrote something that it was a great pleasure to have you with us. We have learned many things from you, and we hope to have another webinar in order to have deep knowledge about Latin America general data protection.
Excellent. And I
And
hope
the
I have
differences
fun.
between the EU.
It will be so nice to be here in a next opportunity and bring you good news about our evolution about this kind of discussion. It will be very nice. I will be very glad to be here again. Thank you again for the invitation. It was a big pleasure, and hope it could help people to understand better that for the moment now GDPR is still the big law of data protection of the world, but we are trying to be in the same way, and it's very important. It's just
Exactly, exactly. And with that comment, we are here. We are all over. Thank you very much for all the attendees for joining today. And it was a great pleasure to share all these insights and all these informations. And really, cooperation is the one that we are actually seek in EADPP. So be here with us in order to exchange our views, our thoughts, and everything. Thank you very much. And if our team and Andrea and maybe Michael Spratt can please stay for a minute after saying the last goodbye. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I can see, we are accepting some messages in the chat. Thank you very much, Giovanni, Raimonda, Pedro. Thank you. Thank you very much.